Amen. Well, I wanted to talk tonight about more common issues. We can talk about bipolar, we can talk about some of the big issues of mental health, but really a lot of mental health issues, and we talk about that term mental health, they really come down to everyday relational issues that we struggle with. So what's a more common issue than we could deal with than anger and an inability to forgive? And this is something that we deal with very regularly, correct? And so I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit of concept about anger tonight. I also want to talk about forgiveness. But first I want to go back to one of the early slides. Worry, anxiety, or panic. We have this progression. Now if we were going to get angry, who in your life can get you more angry than anybody? Spouse? Typically some of the greatest hurt in our lives, some of the greatest pain in our lives, some of the greatest anger in our lives has to do with family. Remember I said I want to write a book someday, I want it to simply be titled, Family is Pain. Yeah, pain is a positive and a negative. Without the pain of the relationship, we don't grow, we don't learn. But there's a group of people that can bring anger into our lives, and unresolved anger that leads even to unforgiveness, and the inability to forgive and to give back love. It's our own family. Now, I'll give you an example of this. Sometimes, have you ever had any family member that you've had to worry about? And you worried about them so much, but they didn't really even care the fact that you were worrying. They told you to mind your own business. So what are you worrying about me for? And maybe there was a time you got a phone call in the middle of the night or something was happening, you knew that they were not in a good place and anxiety would set in. Because you knew you were powerless. You couldn't steer them around. You couldn't have input. You had no influence anymore. Maybe there was a time of panic. When no matter what you did, they couldn't listen, they wouldn't listen. Have you ever been there? Anybody? Because we get put in those situations in family and in relationships to where we feel like we're losers. I have a training that I do called How Do I Face Loss Without Being a Loser? Because sometimes when in the midst of loss in a relationship, we feel like we're a loser. We feel like there's something wrong with us. That's where some of those lies that we tell us in our wrong thinking come back and we begin to beat ourselves up. If I'd have been a better mother, if I'd have been a better father, if I'd have been, if and those if-onlys of our life begin to rob us of our joy. So I want to jump ahead to what we're going to talk about tonight. But first, remember Jonah. I'm really going to unpack Jonah more in this last week as we talk about grief and suicide. But I wanted to kind of take you through just a couple of things. I'm just going to read it off to you here. So remember that we left Jonah and he was in the whale. He had run from God, and it had cost him to run from God. And he ended up being thrown over, and we know the story. Here's what he said in the middle of the well. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord. And my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will make good. I will say, salvation comes from the Lord. God said, okay, you got it. You spit him out. He goes to Nineveh. He preaches. What happens in Nineveh? People are just torn. They repent. They fall on their knees. The king hears it. He rips his clothes. He says, we're going to submit to God. And after praying that prayer, after saying, God, I will sing out my praise to you, to your holy temple, then we see this in Jonah 4. First, I'll go back up to 3. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. But to Jonah, this seemed very wrong. And he became angry. He prayed to the Lord, not that my prayers would come up to you. He prayed, isn't this what I said when I was still at home? This is what I tried to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew you were a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sin and calamity. Now, Lord, take away my life. It's better for me to die than to live. I will praise you, and how dare you? I will praise you, you let me down. And this is a perfect example of Jonah playing God. We talked about, you make a pretty lousy God, folks. By being in charge of your life, you make a pretty lousy God. But we do that to God at times, just like Jonah's done here. So let's talk about anger. And if you look in your book, we have some, I'm not going to give you any words for this. I'm going to ask you the first question there. Are you conflict avoidant, or do you walk into conflict and address it? So how many of you here would say that you are conflict avoidant? You want to avoid it as much as you can? Now, for those of you, which is a pretty good part of you all here, right? Why are you afraid of conflict?
You don't want to make the other person mad?
You
don't want to make the other person mad?
You don't want to make the other person mad?
Or anybody mad, I guess.
Okay. Anybody else? There's a big group of you back over here, so I'm just going to point this direction.
For me, it's a sin of being a people pleaser.
Want to be a people pleaser, solve the problems, keep the peace.
Sometimes you don't know what has caused the conflict. With no knowledge of it, you're a little reluctant to wade into it.
So when I ask that question, who's conflict avoidant, the fastest hand that went up is right over here. So why are you conflict avoidant?
I don't like anybody to be mad.
I don't like anybody to be mad. Now, when we say this, and these are very common responses, right, to this question, where do we get this mentality that people should never get mad, everyone should be pleased, and every problem should be fixed by, where do we get, is this right thinking or wrong thinking, folks? Remember we talked about the thinking errors? I have yet to meet a single person in my life that I think I need to please them in everything that they do. Or that somehow everyone's got to avoid being mad. Wait, people get mad all the time, right? Let me ask you this. Since you're conflict avoidant, does that mean that you never get mad? If you're conflict avoidant, does that mean then that you never get mad?
No.
That you're worried about pleasing yourself so much that you'll never allow yourself to get angry because no one should get mad?
We explode.
What, excuse me? You explode?
We stuff and stuff and stuff until we explode.
We stuff our feelings in about things because, all the times you're trying to please everybody, you're trying to do all the steps you said. It's unfair. And you know it's unfair. You know it's not right. You're actually going counter your own character and your own culture, your own person, your own values. You're going against that to the point that you can't hold in it and you just explode. And what good does that do you? All of a sudden this person that you've been trying to please and please and please and please sees you explode and you're so mad at them, and like, where'd the anger come from? I didn't do anything wrong, it must be you. You must be crazy. So how do we get into this? Again, show me the hands of the people that are conflict avoidant. Raise your hands up. We're looking at least half the people around here, more than half, right? How do we get that? Let me ask you this. If Jesus came and said, Lord, I will come to the earth, but I'm going to be conflict avoidant. I want to please everybody, so the Sadducees and Pharisees, I don't really want to make them upset. So I'm just going to walk around and do the things that, will look good and make people happy. If Jesus had done that, and been as 3/4 of the people were here in the room, do you think it would have gone to the cross? But what did he tell us to do? He told us to what? Take up our what? Is that a people-pleasing thing? And yet somehow 3/4 of the people here do a thing that Jesus wouldn't do. So did Jesus not confront the people he needed to confront? No, was he afraid of them getting mad? Richard Ruler came and said, Lord, what must I do to enter heaven? And Jesus said, you must keep the commandments. And he said, I have done them since my birth. He said, wow, wow. You're an incredible guy. You followed the law ever since your birth. You're rich, you're young, you're a ruler. There's only one thing you lack. And if we stood before Jesus and heard there's only one thing we lack, just one thing to get into heaven, what do you think we do? People pleasers. Well, what is it, Lord? I'll take care of it for you. He said, you need to go sell all you have and give to the poor. Come follow me. And what did the rich young ruler do? It says in the scriptures, it's a term we don't use a lot, it says that his countenance fell. It said he turned and he walked away. Now what's not in that story? See, Jesus wasn't a conflict avoidant savior. He wasn't a people pleaser. He didn't go after him. He let him leave. He let him make the choice he had to make and let him live with the consequences of it, that he's not going to get into heaven because he's not willing to turn loose to the things of this world. And Jesus let him walk away. But if he's a people pleaser, well, okay, I'll tell you what, you can keep a little bit of it. Oh, come on back. Well, I know I've got to put a lot on you to really follow me. You know, I think you just follow me a little bit. I tell you what, why don't you come follow me during the week and you can go home on weekends. You could have done a people-pleasing thing, right? Did he avoid the conflict with the man? We say, and I'm saying, am I saying to you that I want you to be conflicting with? Folks, what do you think our only offensive weapon is? The sword. We're supposed to fight back with the Word of God. So let me ask you this. How many of you here don't mind a conflict? You'll step into it and get it fixed. I want to get it resolved right now. Let's talk about it. No, we're not going to wait till tomorrow. We're going to fix it right now. Now, keep your hands up. Folks, we drive these other people nuts. Because we won't let it go. And they feel taken over, they feel pressured, they feel, and look, we're at less than a quarter here. We're like 80-20, right? So how is it we have this to where there are people that are going to make sure we get things taken care of? Now here's our problem, those of us that are not conflict avoidant. We push too hard. We demand. When someone turns and walks away, no, it's going to settle right. You come back, we're not, no, right? Because we don't know the balance then of pleasing someone in the midst of our demanding. We don't have a balance in that. So you have two groups of people here that don't have the balance on anger and conflict. We're either too hard or we're too soft. So what does it look like in the middle? Now, when I hire people to work for me, I hire all the time. I interviewed 6 people last week. And I said, this is one thing I say to them. I don't do drama. If you want to have a place to work that's filled with drama, I'm sure there's plenty of them in Fort Wayne. Please go work there. But we don't do it here. And I always have followed the Matthew 18 principle. If you have a problem, go to the person. If they don't listen to you, take somebody else. If not, then go to the church. Well, guess what? So if I have a problem and someone comes in, I hear them talking about somebody behind their back. I'll say, I sound like having a problem with so-and-so. Come into my office. Yeah, I got so-and-so here that having a problem with you behind your back. I'm going to have you talk to them. That's how I settle things. Guess what? How many of these problems do you think I have to do this to? Because they know I'll do it. I'm not conflict avoidant. I'm going to make sure we're going to keep everything clean. I'm not going to have any drama behind my back. And I have a lot of people, no. My program, you know you're going to be called on the carpet. If you got something to say it to people's face. That's how I do things, right? Last year, of all my clinical staff, I lost no one. I had 100% retention of all my clinical staff because we live a transparent life there in my organization. So how do we find this balance between the 80% in the world that's trying to please the 20% in the world that's trying to drive them nuts and saying you must do it right now? How do we live it? How do we get here, folks? How did our culture produce us to be like this? How does anger and conflict impact you? I've left 3 spaces there and I want you to fill them in yourself. How does anger and conflict impact you? When you have a conflicting issue with a relationship and 80% of you are conflict avoidant, how does it impact you personally? If someone calls and says, there's something we need to talk about, or There's something I need to resolve with you, or I'm really mad at you, and you hear that call, and that person comes to you, what does that do to you? What would you write down there? If you're conflict avoidant, then you must not like it when someone has to bring something to you. What happens to you? What are your words? Write them down and talk about it.
Makes me sad, makes me think, what did I do?
Makes me sad like I did something wrong. So you take it on yourself that just because someone has a beef with you, it means that you did something wrong. Well, maybe they're wrong.
I don't sleep. I'll replay scenarios over and over in my head.
So you obsess over it. You've got to figure it out. But even if when you think about it over and over again, you never really resolve it. Then how does it resolve?
Well, eventually I have to face it. Otherwise I'm never sleeping.
Mm-hmm. Which means you have to go to the person and deal with it or address it, or. And then for you in that type of a conflict, how many hours and or days does that take?
Not too many. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you typically fix it within a day?
No.
You're gonna lose a couple nights sleep within the week?
Within a week. Resolved.
So you'll struggle with this and think about this and process this and lose sleep over it for 4 to 5 days. Whew. Man, that must be hard. Why not do it in 2 days? Huh?
It's not always 4 to 5 days, but
Well,
depending on situation.
so there's some things that you have kind of a hierarchy. If it's a more serious issue, it's going to take me more worry to get over it. If it's a less serious issue, maybe a little bit less time. Anybody else? Tend to isolate. So your avoiding is really avoiding.
I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to be. I don't want to go to church. I don't want to be.
Wow, so you're a runner. You're not just conflict avoidant, you're a runner. You're hideaway. You're like, put me on the desert island, no phone, no contact. Why do you do that?
I think part of me is like, it's embarrassing. Like if I have to, if there's a conflict and I am wrong in it, I don't want to face my pride very much. That's why I just avoid everybody and don't see anybody. I don't ever have to deal with it.
So it's not okay for you to be wrong? Folks, you see how sometimes the most simplest things in life or in a relationship, we make a big deal out of it when it's really sometimes a small deal. We overprocess it, we overthink it, we overworry about it, we overfret about it. And guess what's happening when all that's happening? Folks, there's anger being built up underneath there. Because this isn't fair. I'm losing sleep over this. This isn't right. And your anger then is going to come out somewhere at some time. Maybe you're going to explode. But one of the things that happens in these is, what's your concept of truth and justice? What's your concept of fairness in all of this? Is it fair for you to lose a night, 2 nights, 3 nights of sleep? Is it fair for you, because of a conflict, to have to hide away and avoid and isolate? Is it fair that you have to feel like you got to please everybody and fix everything? Again, can you see that maybe this is a thinking error? We're not looking at this right. And what about truth and justice? I'm pretty sure the Lord said if the truth will set you free. So how do you take a conflict, put truth into it, and have a just resolve that benefits everybody, even if someone gets mad? And is that okay? Is it okay if you're right, and this is where again we're going to begin to push around here a little bit, that they get mad. Now, there's sometimes you've thought you're right, you're set on it, I know what I'm talking about, and you found out you're wrong, and that's when sometimes start to come back and say, but what's normal in an interaction is to do that, right? Let's look at the truth of the facts. Let's make a decision. I blew it. I'm sorry. It looks like I failed you. I'm really sorry. Or I think you're wrong here. How can we resolve this? Because you and I are at an impasse, whatever it would be, to actually bring it out and deal with it. And yes, just like the rich young ruler, they may turn and walk away. Are you okay with that? That they can leave and not see it your way. Why is it you think we're having such a hard time with that level of transparency and honesty and just simply in a relationship? What are some of the words that you would put down there? How does anger and conflict impact you?
Get defensive.
Get defensive. What is defensive? Self-protection. We use this term because I get defensive. What does that mean?
Put your guard up.
Hmm?
Put your guard up.
Put your guard up?
Justifying your own feelings.
Justifying your own feelings?
When I think of defensiveness, I think it's all about me.
Mm-hmm. Protecting myself, protecting my position, protecting, how dare you? Now, some of the terms we've used here, just even so far, people pleasing, not wanting anybody to get mad, getting defensive. Can you please show me the biblical perspective that you gained from that? Where do you get that out of the Bible? Are any of those ways that we're dealing with relationships, is it biblical? You're not going to find those terms biblically. Why? Because we don't handle our anger right. We don't deal with our conflict well. There's a way that we can do it that's going to be healthy. And you know what? I'm not be able to please everybody. 2 years ago, I had to draw the line for one of my staff members. She says, I'm not doing it. I said, then you're not going to work here anymore. And she was a good high performer, man. She was doing great with me. But I am not going to be held to the line and say, I'm not going to be willing to do what you're going to want me to do. I'm not going to take this. I want to give her a raise. It was a crazy thing. I want to increase her. She says, no. Okay, you don't want a raise. You'd rather stay at your own. Yeah, okay, fine. Then you have to leave. So she left. So I made her mad. So she said, I'm going to leadership. I'm going to go somewhere else and work as a leader. I said, great, she got a leadership job. 3 months later, she's not there anymore. It's not my problem. She said, leadership was hard. I said, yeah. Get it all aligned sometimes. Am I responsible for every person that gets mad at me? Am I responsible for every conflict? Am I responsible to resolve it? Am I responsible to make sure that person feels good about it? No. I'm not here to take on the responsibility of everyone that I know. I'm here to be a person of truth and integrity, to control my emotions and feelings, and treat people properly. But sometimes, we just get frustrated and it comes out, right? So let's keep moving on here. Anger is all through the Bible. God's anger burned against nations. Jesus' anger burned in Mark 3 with a man whose hand was shriveled. And you fill in these three. Anger is not a blank, but a blank which can turn blank. What 3 words did you put in there? What?
I don't know, is it not a feeling?
I can't hear.
Sorry. It's not a feeling.
Anger is not a feeling, but a
Emotion?
But an emotion, pretty similar, which can turn
Which can turn ugly.
can turn ugly. Yeah, simple, right? So what three did you put down?
Well, I only have ugly.
No, ugly? Anybody else? You got yours? No?
Not a solution, but a problem, which can turn hearts.
Say it again louder.
It's not a solution, but a problem, which can turn hearts.
Anger is not a solution, but a problem which can turn hearts. The original word I had in there first is anger is not a sin. Anger is not a sin. I'll go to that later. Anger is not a sin. So then what is it?
It's a blessing.
Hmm?
It's a blessing.
But a blessing that can turn
Hearts.
hearts. Or a problem that can turn deadly. So let's look at it. If you look at this list that I put together, and you may have some other ones. If you think about anger, it may start as an annoyance, a displeasure, a resentment, bitterness, rage, vindictiveness, revenge, hostility, violence. So there's all kinds of forms that anger can take, right? And now, when does it become a sin? Be angry, yet do not sin. Let the sun go down on your anger. When does anger become a sin? If it's not a sin, it says like this. Alcohol is legal. It's not wrong to drink. But there's a point when drinking too much alcohol becomes a problem, right? And that's true about anything. So let's look at it. This is what I use quite a bit. You'll see over here a line that says between 1 and 10. Remember I talked about the scaling question? And when I work with teenagers, I say to them, I want you to tell me the worst time you get, the angriest you've been. That's probably 9 or 10. And they'll tell me, like, man, I had a kid just 3 weeks ago, got mad at his foster mom, thought she was trying to take his PlayStation. He takes a PlayStation, he runs away with it, but he sets it down on the sidewalk, takes all the patio furniture, throws it off in the yard, then leaves. So he's a runaway. Then he gets arrested, goes away to ACJC, goes away SC. I want to go back, I want to go back. I said, oh, she doesn't have to take you back, she does. He's really humble now. But here's the issue is that he got up in that 9 or 10 range. That's when you lose control or actually begin to do damage. So if we're to look at this, what I typically say is you want to keep your anger between a 1 and a 5. When you cross over that midway mark, when you cross over that 5 into the 6, you're beginning to lose control. And it's okay. Is it okay to be annoyed? Right? I'm annoyed by the guy that just passed me. By this, that, what? You can get annoyed, right? So where would you put annoyance or being annoyed on a scale of 1 to 10? On the anger scale? What? 1? Anybody else? What about displeasure? I'm disappointed. I'm not pleased.
Pretty much depends on what level your displeasure rises.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're mildly displeased, it's no big deal.
Yep.
If you're seriously displeased, people shoot each other with things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Because we begin to change things from that 1 all the way up to 10. So let's look at resentment. Where would you put resentment and looking through the eyes of anger on a scale between 1 and 10? I'm talking about I resent you. I resent what you did. I resent how you treated my family. I resent what you said to me. Resentment's a little bit more than annoyance, isn't it? So where'd you put that on the scale?
Well, in the way that you talked about it, if you're saying 1 to 5, once you get past 5, it's kind of a bigger deal, then it's got to be greater than 5.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think once you start resenting, it's pretty hard to go back,
Mm-hmm.
from my experience. So I'd say be around 5 or 6 probably.
5 or 6? And if you can keep your resentment at a 5 or 6 and take it down, you're fine. But if it goes from a 6 to 7, then you begin to lose control over it. And that's your attitude toward that person. So what about bitterness? Where'd you put that on a scale of 1 to 10? Okay, you people pleasers, I'm waiting for you. Please me.
I think bitterness should come after resentment, just because it's just like it's that next step where you resent, but then bitter, you're like really there. You're right on the edge of the next thing, which would probably like being vindictive or.
Mm-hmm. You begin to see the scale going up. I may be annoyed, I'm really displeased, all of a sudden I get a little resentful, I get bitter, I can't believe you did that. I begin to hold it against them, I begin to make a judgment against that person. First it's how it impacted me, now I want to have an impact upon them. Then I can get vindictive. I'm going to get a little bit of revenge in here, I'm going to start paying them back. I'm going to make sure they pay, I'm going to put some pain on their life. And we begin to see that scale go higher, right? What about rage? That's pretty easy, right? There are people, and maybe there's people in here that you've gotten in such a rage that you don't even remember what you did. It happened to me one time in my life. I was young. Someone was being abused, and I got mad about it, and I just went off and mad about the abuse. And so rage, you get up that 10 area. When you get so rageful that you act, then you're probably going to hurt somebody or do some damage. What about hostility? I've worked with a lot of hostile people in my life. A lot of hostile people. You see that at some point when we're annoyed or we're displeased, you know what? We're angry. This isn't right. You know, I'm going to take care of it. Don't worry, I'm going to give them a call. I'll take care of them, tell them to keep their dog out of our yard. And as long as you keep that anger level at a 5 or below, you're fine. But when you begin to cross up into the bitterness, the resentment, and it begins to grow to a rage in you, at 6, 7, and 8, you begin to lose control. If you ever get to the point of your anger where you're at a 7 or an 8, get prepared, because you can blow up and lose total control and really ruin something. Now, have you ever hit, anyone here ever hit an 8 or a 9? Well, you're healthy people. I'll tell you have. I have, because I'm a strong personality. You tick me off, I'm going to stand up and fight back. I am not weak. But what I've had to do in my life to learn how to handle my anger is I train in martial arts. I've done it for 14 years. And I have really learned to control the mind and control the thinking. So someone can come up and be really upset with me, be really hostile, and just be standing there, looking at them, sizing them up, thinking, where can I hit them just to drop them and let them know who's boss? Just simply how it is. Because you have to learn how to train that, right? So let's say then you have a child and you're trying to teach a child and grow them up in the way they should go. How do you know when a child's anger is getting so high that they're going to lose control? You ever seen it? So then how do you help that child to stay at a 5 or below so they, quote, don't sin? Remember, we're told, be angry, yet do not sin. But most of us never think about when our anger becomes a sin. When our anger crosses over, and at what point it crosses over, to where it becomes harmful. Now, is anger only harmful to the person who it's directed toward, or is there any harm that's done to you in your anger? How does your anger going outward harm you?
I think it can destroy a relationship
Mhm.
with words that are said. Once it's said, you can't take it back. It's there.
And if most of us were honest, we would say that our words have probably done more damage than our own physical actions. We've probably not hit anyone, struck anyone, shoved anyone down, done those type of things, but what can come out of our mouth, that fire coming out on our tongue, can do damage. And if you've ever done it to a child and said something you regretted it, you see the child's countenance fall, you know you really blew it, right? Now, what is it that we think, and let's get back to this issue of anger and this issue of justification, that we are justified to beat somebody up emotionally because we're beat somebody up verbally because we're angry. Remember, truth and justice. I want to be a person of truth. I'm going to tell you honestly how I feel about this. I want it to be just and fair for the both of us, but sometimes we use our justice in a way to beat up people. This is right, this is what I know, you need to listen to me, and our anger begins to hurt people. Now maybe you're a person that's been hurt by someone doing that to you. Maybe you felt that. Anybody here? Been on the receiving end? How does that make you feel when that is so poured out on you in anger? You know it's not fair, you know it's not just, you know it's not done in truth and love. How does that make you feel? Like a loser. Feel worthless. Feel useless. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're truth. Maybe I am worthless. Now, folks, getting back to what we said when we first started, just about being a people pleaser, right? Where do we get these concepts? Where is it that someone's word can convince us that maybe we're useless? Or where do we get? These are thinking errors. We're not thinking right. It's okay for people to get mad. Give an example. Jesus went to the temple and he saw the money changers. What did he do? Hi, I'm here to be a people pleaser today, so would you guys please take the tables outside? You're really offending me. I'm feeling a little annoyed here, trying to keep the anger below a 5, so could you guys just kind of move on out of here? Is that what he did? Hi, oh, this is really bad. I'm going to go home and worry about it for 2 or 3 days and come back and see if maybe they're gone. Hopefully they'll just leave and get my vibes. I don't like them to be there. No, he went in and started turning over the temple, made a cord and started whooping them around. Was he wrong? Did he sin? Well, we know he didn't sin, right? So we just have an example here where Jesus got righteously indignant. I love to say that term. He got angry. He said, not in my Father's house. It isn't going to happen here. Stormtrooper, get out of here. Did he sin?
No.
Ever. So we know that he got angry and it was okay. You people pleasers? We know that he got angry and it was okay. He didn't sin. That's what we're talking about here. When our anger gets up to that 5 or 6 or 7, folks, put yourself on hold. Take yourself out of the equation. When it begins to rise up and you know it's there, you know you can say something, do something that's going to hurt or harm, or you're crossing over to where you begin to sin by your thoughts against that person. I want to hurt them, I want to harm them, I want to make them feel it, I'm going to put it back on them. That's when you're moving your anger towards sin. That's why it's so important for us to be able to look at when our displeasure and annoyance moves to resentment and bitterness. When I begin to get vindictive, when I begin to think about revenge, that's when we're crossing over in our anger to sin. And the problem is, we don't oftentimes know when we're getting there, because that step from a 4 to a 4.5, from a 4.5 to a 5, from a 5, because all of it's going on where? Getting back again to our thinking errors. We don't realize that we're wrong. We don't realize that we're going wrong. We convince ourselves that we're right. We begin to believe a lie even about another person to where we justify our anger Jesus was justified by the behaviors of the people. We justify our own anger by what we tell ourselves in our minds. We play mind games with ourselves. We lie to ourselves. We convince ourselves we're right when we're not. And sometimes then we're so scared of it, we're going to isolate ourselves or avoid it whatever way we can instead of actually face and deal with it. And sometimes you just got to get angry. In a healthy way. Why? Why is it important to be normally angry? Why is it important and okay to have healthy anger?
It's a release. It's a release.
It's a release. You don't hold it in, you're just simply being honest. This hurt my feelings, this made me mad.
It means that we're not emotionally numb, we care about something.
Mm-hmm. Are you going to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was a teacher for 30 years, and I finally decided after a lot of years that if you don't get people's attention, you can't teach them any. And there are times when you just can't get people's attention by being easy and soft. I'm not saying a little crispy in the voice, or I'm not talking about throwing people against the wall, although I felt like it. But it just, you gotta get their attention. But God has had to get our attention down through the centuries.
Mm-hmm.
How it seems to me.
Look at all through his fierce anger burned, God's anger burned, his anger burned. Of course, God never did sin. So there's something about anger that it's okay, it's justifiable, but you can't let it turn into sin. Jesus, let's think about some of his words. You whitewashed tombs. You brood of vipers. You're white on the outside, but dead on the inside. That's people-pleasing, folks. That's people-pleasing. Why would he speak so honestly? Was he afraid of hurting their feelings? Offending them? Truth. Said from a heart of integrity. Now, did it change him? Was it Jesus' responsibility to change the Sadducees and the Pharisees? Was he going to change his mission and his vision of what God's called him here to do to please the Sadducees and the Pharisees? No. Yeah, correct our thinking errors. And why do I say that? Because we need to have healthy relationships with people, to be able to love them enough to be honest with them, even if it offends them, even if it hurts them feelings, even if it makes them mad. We also have to be healthy enough for ourselves, because when you hold this stuff in and it causes you to lose sleep and it causes you to beat yourself up or to isolate and run, folks, that's not healthy. That's not God's way. I make my wife mad. I am gonna make her mad. And she is able to do it fairly well for me too. And you know what? That's okay. Sometimes I blow it. I'm a strong personality. I say what I mean. I get frustrated. I snap at her. I gotta apologize. Any opportunity I have to be honest in my anger or honest in my issues, it gives me the opportunity to be real enough to be able to come back and say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And what's one of the most important things that we have to learn from the Bible, we're going to talk about in the next section, what is forgiveness? Do you realize how much forgiveness is a gift? Not to keep us in chains and enslaved to somebody else's issues? So let's look at this again from right here. We know that there's a negative power out there, right? Anger can either be a positive, just like everything else, just like pain. Pain can be a positive or a negative, right? Anger can be a positive power, or it can be a negative power. Why is it that most of the time we interpret anger as negative? Because we are afraid that our anger will offend or will harm. True? And sometimes that negative anger will persecute somebody, will actually put such pain on their life that they draw away from us, and it becomes a negative, and they feel like we're harmful or abusive or mean or whatever it would be. And there's no redemption on that negative side. That's when relationships are broken. That's when relationships are severed. Now again, as Jesus did with the rich young ruler, he let him walk away. He let him leave. Why? But if we can take and put it over on the positive side, look at it. Can your anger be a positive power to heal the persecuted and the broken, so that pain can be a positive? We think all on this negative side. But let's look at that again from a positive, on the positive side. Can anger be a positive to heal brokenness and persecution? All the time. What are some examples where anger about what has happened has produced great results? Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Where'd they come from? Anger Against Cancer. I want to start a foundation for children that have this type of cancer. I'm mad at cancer. I hate cancer. How many times has that anger towards something that was unfair, we were talking about the justice issue, the truth, changed somebody's life to where they become a strong component for or against something, and they've changed the world? We can give another example. There's plenty of them out there. When have you seen anger used for good? To spur, to motivate?
When I think of it in terms of just small, like my life, I had a strict parent, and her strictness kept me in line. Had she been permissive and not had to get angry with me sometimes, who knows what kind of a mess I could have really been. And you know, I've seen these things that say if you raise your children, you can spoil your grandchildren. But if you spoil your children, you will raise your grandchildren.
Can you think of a time where anger became a positive and brought healing in pain? I said Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Nobody know what the story of that was? Lowered the blood alcohol content by law. Why? Because one mama's child was killed by a drunk driver. And she got mad. She got so mad, she said, things have got to change. And folks, these people make the news all the time, don't they? Because of my loss.
We just, close by where we live, a child was killed on a bicycle because of a lack of a stoplight. The parents pushed it, and a stoplight was put in right where it happened.
Did they sin in their anger? See, anger can be an incredible motivator, can't it? We know that the world has been changed, cultures have been impacted when someone got mad enough to do something about it. I want there to be truth, I want there to be justice, I want it to be fair. I'm going to dedicate my life to make sure that happens. Is that a positive or negative? They've had a second order change, they've changed their reality, they've reframed their truth, and they come out for or against something, and they're going to make a difference. The problem is that we spend too much of our time over here on the negative side. Anger is a negative. Anger brings pain and persecution. I want to avoid it, so I'm going to have 80% of you here are going to go on this negative side and avoid it rather than allow anger to have its work in people.
When's it turn?
Did I just say that? Go ahead.
When's it turn into like stubbornness? Like, I don't know.
Well, stubbornness kind of underlays all these things that we had on the previous, right?
Okay, yeah.
Stubbornness, is that a feeling or emotion? That's a will issue, right? That's again that justice, I will be right, it is going to go my way, I'm stubborn, I'm not going to back down. That's a will issue. That's me trying to exert my will upon somebody else. Has nothing to do with anger, has nothing to do with feelings and emotions. That's a filter through which I have run my anger to convince you that I'm always right. Anyone here ever know anyone who's always right can never be wrong? There's a disorder, it's called borderline personality disorder. Now, borderline personality disorder is one of the only disorders in the DSM-5 that no insurance company will pay for treatment for medicine for, because there is no cure. So there's nothing they can't put you on any meds. It's not a chemical imbalance. The insurance doesn't like to pay for treatment because they say there's no cure for it. Borderline personality is a critical thinking error, like we talked about. You live with somebody who's bipolar, excuse me. Bipolars are fun, they just kind of act crazy every once in a while off their meds, but borderlines can never be wrong. A borderline, and this is one of my standards for it. You know, the Bible says make your yes, yes, and your no, no. Borderlines can't do that. I said, you're borderline. Oh, I'm not. Yes, you are. I'm going to convince you are by asking you one question. I'm going to ask you a question, I want a yes or no answer. Okay, go ahead. Do you think whatever it be? Well, now it depends. There you go, thank you. No, that doesn't mean anything. I have to answer the question. No, I ask you a question, yes or no. No, ask me another one. Okay, I'll ask you another one. I asked them a question. Do you think yes or no that da. Well, no, that's not really easy. There you go, thank you very much. No, that's not right. No, I can answer yes or no. No, you can't. You cannot answer yes or no. Here's another test. You talk to the family of people that live with a borderline. Say, I want you to hold up how many fingers the times that they've ever come and apologized to you for what they've done. They have such a difficult time ever coming and admitting that they're wrong. They can't say, I'm sorry. They're always right. And they will boss everybody around to convince you that they know what they're doing. Borderlines folks, they're tough to live with. Predominantly in women, but there are men out there that are borderline as well. Now, how do you deal with someone who then is convinced that everything they do is correct, and they never have to admit they're wrong? There was a lady that started the treatment for them. It's called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And this woman actually ended up in a psych hospital for months. And while in there, very bright, she realized that the treatment wasn't working. So she came out and started her own treatment. Became a professional in the field and started DBT. It's a 5-day-a-week group process of brutal honesty and battering down the lies that the person tells themselves. And it's tough. And most of the times I've seen the groups, the therapists can't be conflict avoidant. You got to be in their face and on it, or you can't change their reality. What you're dealing with is a thinking error. You're dealing with an inability to think things properly. And anger will do the same thing to you if you get up at that 7 or 8. You think you're right. You think you're justified. You think you can do whatever you want, treat someone how you want to treat them, and you're wrong. But your emotions are so stirred into your negative side over here, or that person is angry at you, you're going to be so conflict avoidant, you're going to take the persecution, let them beat you up, you're going to take the pain in a negative way, rather than stand up and say, no, I don't deserve to be treated like this. You're wrong. And folks, God doesn't want us to be beaten down emotionally in relationships. True? He wants us to be healthy. He wants us to be able to determine that, you know, your heart's not right toward me right now. And my attitude's getting wrong toward you. We need to have some time away so we can think and pray. Folks, if I could count the number of people who have been angry at me in my life, that doesn't mean I have any revenge or vindictiveness toward them, right? I'm in control, and I'm responsible for who? Just for myself. So just like Jesus with the rich young ruler, he wasn't responsible for his salvation. He came to say, this is what you need to do to get into heaven. And he made a choice to walk away. But if we never confront issues in people's lives, we never give them an opportunity to make a decision, and then either to walk away or come toward us, we let them off the hook. I hate to say that, but I think that may be a sin in and of itself. Because you don't care enough about the person to actually engage them in a way that's going to help them to get healthy and balanced and see reality right, that's going to set them free. You let them down, you let them off the hook, you fail them. So again, we've talked about anger here, right? It's okay to be angry, yet do not sin. Matter of fact, don't let the sun go down on your anger. Any comments about that before we move on?
Is it possible that you may never reconcile?
Yes, am I no, yes. He showed me that a lot of the things we tell us about ourselves to be conflict avoidant, will be people pleaser, are not biblical. And Jesus is our example, so let's kind of move on. Forgiveness. For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. Isn't that a fun verse? You take God at His word. Do you believe this? Matthew 6, 14, 15. If you forgive when they sin against you, God will forgive you. But if you don't forgive them, your Father will not forgive your sins. Wait a minute. I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, my sins have been forgiven. What is this saying? Well, I don't have to forgive them. I'm just going to be mad at them the rest of my life because you know it's all covered by the blood. What standard do we have here from Matthew? From Jesus himself. What's he saying?
Blood won't cover unforgiveness. Blood won't cover unforgiveness.
Why would Jesus say this? Why would he put such a standard that we must forgive those who sin against us? Wow. That's kind of like, you know, that we talked about with anxiety, be anxious for nothing. For an entire month to say I'm going to be anxious for nothing but in all things? Whoa, that was a tough one, wasn't it? Here's another hard one, isn't it? So you have to ask yourself, even today, is there someone that has sinned against you that you've not forgiven? See, if you're conflict avoidant, you're just going to avoid them and not talk to them and avoid and make sure that you don't ever see them so you don't have to deal with it and face the fact that you're carrying around unresolved sin in your life by not forgiving them. But God will understand. So for the benefit of my own kids, what did we both have to do? We had to forgive each other. Because if I carry the forgiveness, and I'm unforgiven, I carry it year after year after year after year, who's winning? It's kind of like this. if I am angry at you and I'm so unforgiving toward you, yeah, you don't even know about it. You just go on with your life thinking, well, that's, who's in prison, folks? Who's chained by that unforgiveness? And there's maybe you've read it, maybe you've seen the movie, but there was the movie called The Shack. Anybody here see it or read it? Not always theologically, I mean, God, the whole thing, but it was, for me, from out of the box, it was incredible. In fact, we went to see it 2-3 years ago on Easter with a friend we took, and we walked out of there in silence. We couldn't speak. Because I'll tell you what, that book or that movie, no matter what you think about it, was one of the most powerful things. Why? Because this man, while saving his son, gave up his daughter. And he was mad at God. And that man that murdered his daughter. What? If you want to pick a thing to write a book about, now there's a hard one. And you remember in the book or the movie where he had to sit in the judgment seat and be the judge on which child would live and which child would, oh my goodness, he said, I can't do it. But one concept in there is when you forgive, you take the hands of the person from off your neck. You take your hands off their throat and you're free. Because when you're so angry at the fact that you won't forgive, your hands are around their throat and you want to choke them and you're so focused on them and everything else, and finally you have to release your hand. There's something about that. And the concept there is you must take your hands off their throat and forgive them to be healed. So folks, what does it take to truly forgive? When you hear the term forgiveness, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you were to put different sins or issues that people have affected you with, there are ones that are down there at the 1 or 2 mark, easy to forgive, right? Then there's the ones that maybe even do that 4 or 5 level, right? But what if it's a 6 or a 7 or an 8? What if it's up there? That's when we feel justified. Remember, we take that truth and justice. We say, I'm right to be this way. I'm right to feel this way. I have a right to be this angry. They don't deserve my forgiveness. Well, I'll forgive them, but I won't forget. So what do you do when your forgiveness, your inability to forgive? If you look through the Bible, it's all about forgiveness, forgiveness, forgiveness. You don't see the term unforgiveness. Because the theological position, the biblical position is you will forgive. It's not an option not to. Here's a quote. In the shadow of my hurt, forgiveness feels like a decision to reward my enemy. But in the shadow of the cross, forgiveness is merely a gift from one undeserving soul to another. If I forgive them, they win. If I forgive them, it's not right. They haven't paid. Remember, get back to the vindictiveness, that anger coming out as revenge, and right? And somehow our anger is oftentimes tied in with our what? Our ability or inability to forgive. So do you have something up in that 7, 8, or 9 level today of someone that you're saying, I just can't forgive them? Now we're getting down to where all of us can live, right? We're talking about mental wellness and wholeness and balance in our lives. So I'm going to ask you honestly, is there someone here that's, raise your hand and be bold enough to say there's someone I have not forgiven I need to? I'm not going to ask you to do it. I have unforgiveness in my heart yet. And you see what Jesus said. Does he not take this seriously? But just like the rich young ruler he allowed to walk away, he's going to set his standard and say, you must forgive. No matter how painful it is, no matter how powerful it is. And the end result is we have to forgive. Why? Because he set the example where? We just talked about it on Easter, on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do.
Chuck,
Yes, sir.
if you've truly forgiven someone, anything that ever happened. I.e., you know, if somebody stole from you, you forgive them, then you forget the fact that they ever stole from you.
I mean, I'll trust them again, but I'm going to forgive them. I'll let go, but when we want to hold on, what is that saying we're doing, folks? We're just playing God again, aren't we?
What if it's you don't want to put yourself in the position to be hurt over and over and over and over? You're willing to forgive them,
Mm-hmm.
but you know that you're just putting yourself in that position to be hurt over.
Yeah, you know, kids will do that to you too. Yeah. No matter how much you love them, how well you raise them, they just seem to hurt you. It's just bad. I think we should just ban being parents, don't you think? And don't even get me started on marriage.
You gotta set healthy boundaries.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And to not let yourself be taken advantage of.
Could you say that 2 words again? Healthy what?
Healthy boundaries.
Healthy boundaries. Like even when you're really angry and you want to take it on yourself and be a people pleaser and you want to, you know, not put the... So there's some healthy boundaries here that are going to be important to have healthy relationships by being honest and real with people. Even to the point that we have to forgive them and be able to move on and allow God to bless it with grace and goodness. The positive side of our triangle. Forgiveness is unlocking the door to set someone free and realizing you are the prisoner. Unforgiveness imprisons us, folks. It's like we have our hands around their neck and we won't turn loose. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I've been licensed in the state of Indiana since 1993. That's the year they started. So I've been licensed as long as Indiana's had licensed therapists. I have worked with probably 4,000 to 5,000 teenagers intensely and also with their parents. And I realized early on that the greatest thing I can do for the kid is try to save the marriage. Try to save the marriage. So we spend hours meeting with the parents. And I do this now. I get an adolescent I'm working with, and I said I'm going to get a referral to be able to do some family counseling. So right now I'm working with a couple that they're divorced, but I'm still doing counseling with them. Why? Because if I can get them stronger and unified, even at past divorce, then I can help their son more. And I have seen a lot of junk in families. This is a broken world. This is what we need to cross. This is what we need faith. This is what we need to save for folks. So let's don't sit there and think just because we're Christians and in church that we've got it all together. We don't struggle with our anger. We don't struggle with unforgiveness. But this is not God's plan for us to stay there. It's not. We've adapted these thinking errors that somehow we can keep hold of our unforgiveness. We can keep or avoid our anger. That's not what God wants us to do. So let's talk about secrets. I've spent a majority of my life trying to get secrets out of people. Why? This simple word makes people squirm. Are there family secrets? Family secrets. You know, when working as an addictions counselor as well, I'll tell you some of the greatest times that people would relapse. They go along several months, they're clean, they're doing great. Family funeral. Probably the top reason people would relapse. Someone died, and all the family had to get together, fighting over what was getting what, all this type of stuff. This nonsense happens at funerals. Having to see that person that you've been trying to avoid for years. Or you're the one who's the ex-fellow and no one wants to see you. Weddings. I thought weddings were supposed to be joyous times. How much stress happens when you're getting ready for a wedding? How much? Have you ever heard of a fight at a wedding? How'd that happen? It's a happy time. Everyone's come together. Fights happen at funerals. Fights happen at weddings. Why? Because there's this unresolved issues, there's unresolved secrets, there's unresolved forgiveness, and anger comes out. Family reunions. Love them or hate them. I'm going to one in June. When I get down sometimes, because here's what happens typically in therapy, right? People want to please you and they want to do what they're supposed to do, but they don't really want you to get inside them. I don't want to be psychoanalyzed. I don't need some therapist messing with my mind. I face this all my life. I'll give you an example of it. I'm riding along on a plane. People are talking. You know how people are really talking sometimes on a plane, other ones are really avoidant? Some of you are talking at me, right? So what do you do for a living? I'm a therapist. Oh. I tell you, it'll shut them up. Same way when I tell them I'm a pastor. I'm a pastor. Oh. I had this one lady that just went off. She goes, really? You're a therapist? Oh, that's so great. This is a blessing to be sitting beside you. Let me tell you about my wedding. And she was getting ready to marry this guy. She tells me this whole story, and I'm sitting there listening to it. And she's an incredibly vibrant young gal. And I listened to the whole thing. I said, why are you marrying him? She goes, what? I said, you asked me in my thought, why are you marrying him? You've just given an incredible example of every reason why you shouldn't. And you're asking me what I think, you've already answered your question. I'm glad I sat beside you. Because people want, they want what? They want truth. Folks, why are we so afraid of truth? Why is it better to live with secrets sometimes than it is to face them? Family secrets. Anybody here have any family secrets? Things you don't talk about, things that are never discussed at the table. You don't bring it up at the, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about him. We don't talk about what happened. So the entire family gets together for a wedding or an occasion, and they're dishonest with each other because there's something out there that everyone knows about, or something out there that no one knows about. We'd rather avoid it, please people, do what's comfortable, than open the wounds and get some healing, folks. Have you ever known someone that has taken their secret to the grave? There are people that I wish you'd have told me, I wish you'd have said sooner. I could tell you hundreds of stories. The man that I first started working with on ambulance, I was 18, I was an ambulance guy, and my ambulance driver was Bill Cox, Baptist minister. No, Bill was a hoot. He thought he was a comedian. He did some stand-up comedy around the place, but he was just a great guy. He taught me so much. He got me my first non-King James Version Bible. Because I was trying to read that thing, I was like, yeah, he says, listen, you need a living Bible. So I got a living Bible. I said, dang, I don't understand this thing. This is incredible. We spend so much time, we get an ambulance call, boom. So I'll start praying, you're going to pray. You pray, okay, and I start praying, we go out. We face a lot of difficult times together. And he taught me so much about being a man of God that loves life, because Bill loved life. And I remember one time he finally told me a story. He was raised by a dad who was alcoholic, and they lived in an apartment upstairs above a bar, a tavern. And he had a little sister. And Dad would prostitute out the little girl, his daughter, give her away to the men downstairs to get money to go buy liquor. And Bill, who was a teenage boy following his dad's footsteps, didn't think anything about it. And they would sell the sister for money and get drunk. At age 19, Bill came to the Lord. Through an incredible experience, he became a pastor. Now, Bill, who'd never had a mother in his life, didn't know how to treat a woman, and he and his wife just could not live together. And she said, well, I don't want to divorce you. They didn't have to step out of the ministry as a Baptist minister. So they got a trailer, bought the lot across the street, and his house was here, and his trailer was here, and they co-parented their son, Tim, until they got him out. And every once in a while, he tried to move home, and it didn't work. And he said, you know, after coming to the Lord, every year I'd go see my sister. I apologize, and I'd weep, and I would pour out my heart. I've changed. I'm different. God has done a work in my life. Please forgive me. She died before he did. Because anger and bitterness and resentment and unforgiveness will do what to you, folks? It'll kill you. And on her deathbed in the hospital, as he stood beside her, down on his knees, begging for forgiveness, she looked forward and refused to even turn her head and look at him. And she died there with her unforgiveness. Fast forward, his father, a drunk all of his life at age 74, found Jesus Christ. Quit drinking that day. And he says, I know my Father's going to be with me in heaven. He was a terrible man. He ruined my sister's life. And I was a part of that. And I sought forgiveness, and God's forgiven me. Here my father comes to the Lord at 74, dies 2 years later. He says, I don't understand, I just got to put that in God's hands. Red wine, I just got to put it in God's hands. Yes, you've got to put it in God's hands. Because some things, folks, you can't fix in your family. Some things, folks, you can't fix in life. But it does you no good to keep the secret in. Now, what's one of the secrets that I hear the most, and we try to get down to? Again, we got to get down to secrets. Why? Because secrets, when you get some of the secrets out, you get the layers out, that's when healing truly comes. And I have been honored, and I say that with total, I have been honored when people have peeled back the layer and given me their secrets. When someone says, when a lady says, I was sexually molested or I was raped when I've never told anyone. I'm honored as a therapist. Because I know that finally, that's been held for so many years, and finally that door is open, and finally I've been able to deal with, oh my goodness. I do not take that lightly. But that's where healing begins. We can't let the secrets, especially issues in our own family. And sometimes we may have it to where, I don't know why I act this way sometimes. I don't know why I explode. About 2 or 3 times a year, I just explode. I don't know, that's just unresolved issues of anger, issues of unfairness and justice in your life. It rises to the surface. It'll blow out on you. It will, period in a sentence. Are there family secrets? Are there things untalked about? Are there things unresolved? Are there things unforgiven? Are there things that you haven't dealt with? Are there things still in hiding? Do you really believe that's God's will for you? Do you believe that's what Jesus died for? Do you believe that's why he went on the cross, was so we could have secrets that would keep us bound up and chains in our lives? He's come to do what? To set us free to have life. How? Abundantly. Yet we allow ourselves through our own family pain, our own secrets, our own anger, sometimes a bitterness, sometimes a resentment, to keep ourselves in chains. And folks, we are like Lazarus laying in that tomb. And Lazarus heard his name. Lazarus, come forth! Well, this is kind of strange. It's kind of, I heard Jesus told me to come forth, but you know, I kind of like it in here. It's cool. I'm all wrapped up and snug. I don't have to do anything. I can lay here the rest of my life and just be here because, you know, I don't want to stay here. No, I'm just going to stay in my tomb. Leave me alone. Is that what Lazarus did? So I asked the question, how can there be glory in a dead man's tomb? But when Lazarus came walking out, what did Jesus do? He said, you go free him. You go unwrap him. Jesus didn't touch him. Jesus just called him. It was up to the family, the disciples, the people, his sisters, to go and set him free. And folks, so sometimes your greatest secret, sometimes your greatest pain, sometimes your greatest anger, sometimes your greatest hurt, the healers are right there beside you. They're called your own family. Physician, heal yourself. So I'm going to challenge you. If there are those secrets, if there is that anger, if there is that unforgiveness, do something about it. Because remember this, that the sins of the fathers and mothers are visited to the third and fourth generation. And I tell you folks, there's not a truer statement said in the Old Testament. But the blessings of God are visited to the thousands of generations for those that love him and are called according to his word. God didn't call you to have 3 generations of sin passed on through all this garbage. He called you to have 1,000 generations of blessing. As you see the little one back there, you say, why do you do what you do, Brother? Why do I do it for the grandkids? I don't do it for you. But if your grandkids, when you're even gone, can have a blessing of eternity, a free life, no family secrets, no anger being carried down, no unforgiveness. Wow. Let me change the generation. That's why I do what I do. Now I had a little preaching in there, didn't I? Okay. Now, in coming in here to talk about this tough stuff, right? Some of it's hard to hear, some of it's hard to deal with. Some of you may be thinking about things you have to do. Am I not honest, right? This is real. The question is, what are you going to do with it? I want to take some time like we did last week and just let you get together in a group and just talk. I want you to unpack it. But is there anything anyone would like to say before we do that? Any comments, things you're processing in your brain? Feel free to go ahead.
Does a lot of it deal with the family stuff? Let's say the other person, you can forgive them, but what if the other person isn't in a position to ever not hurt you? So that's my question with the boundaries, you know. Constantly, are you constantly called to put yourself to be hurt?
Jesus put himself on the cross, and he said, Father, forgive them, they know what they do. And he died, put in a tomb, rose from the grave. Did he go around on a tour to find the people and ask their forgiveness and make sure that they were fine? He didn't. He just went in and said, disciples, carry the load, take it out, take it to the world. I'm going to leave you, I'm not staying here. He, at some point, just like with Richard, you got to let them go. That means you're free. I have no say over whether or not they accept it. I have no say over whether or not they come back or whether or not they change. But I tell you what, you can never tell when God's going to show up. I'm sorry. I've seen it too many times. Someone's hard and they're anti-God, and all of a sudden God gets in and they come back and they begin to say, how many times have I seen a relationship where they haven't talked to each other for years? And I've gotten, why don't you go home and call your daughter? No, I just can't. Why don't you go home and call your daughter? I called her. She hung up on me. I'm sorry, call her again. Oh, red wine, don't you understand? I say, yeah, I do understand. You have some perseverance. Leave her a message this time. How many times have people called somebody and hung up before they even gave them a message? Folks, you have to do what God's called you to do, regardless of what the response is on their part. I'm only responsible for me. And that's what I have to do before God. Remember, I have to forgive. Any other comments? Such a quiet group. Okay, let's take some time, get together like you did last week. Just talk. Unpack some of this. Now just come and sit in and listen every once in a while.